All right, guys. Hey, I want to appreciate you taking time to join me tonight. I want to make it worth your time, so don't forget to ask questions at the end of it. Um, I kind of brainstormed about what we would talk about today, and kind of a tough time of the year is really starting to come for a lot of us, in especially the southern half of the United States, and it's going to transpire up to the northern half, up to where Dale's at and Champlain. So it's really going to. I'd like to talk about late summer fishing, and to back up a little bit. When you talk about the spawn and what transgresses through the seasons of fish, I've always said right after they get done spawning, a bass, on a lot of our reservoirs will be as deep as they will ever be the end of May, the 1st of June. And then as the summer progresses, those fish get shallower. Uh, Maybe not shallower as far as the depth of the lake, but up in the water column. So that's really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that late summer, that July, August, after those offshore schools have kind of been broken up. They're not, every cast type deal. You can't idle around and see them. I just kind of want to talk about like what I do in those situations, what I look for. Fishing gets a lot tougher, for me, July and August. So, um, you know, getting ready for it, like if I'm to go to a lake, and, I reference a lot of this to Major League Fishing because we all the time are going to new lakes. Uh, so if I'm going to a new lake, let's say a Major League Fishing deal, and don't know where I'm going, um, one of the first things I want to know on any lake is there grass? Because grass, in my opinion, is the ultimate trump card that overplays everything else. If you've got good hydrilla, milfoil in the lake, I promise you there's bass relating to it. They can smell that stuff from miles and miles away. I really think they can, and they migrate to it. And I'm sure somebody out there is going to say, well, I don't have grass in my lake, or there's a scenario that it didn't work. I'm going to tell you 95, 98% of the time, if you've got grass in the lake, that's where I'm going to start my search. Those fish are going to use it year round, and that's where I want to start my search. So I think in May and June, a lot of times they'll be at the bottom of the lake where the grass meets the bottom. But as the summer progresses, they may still be out there in that same area, but a lot of times they're going to suspend up in the water column. So that's one thing you've got to determine, where's that bite coming from. That's pretty important. I'm sitting here reading my notes. One thing about the grass, I am talking about green, growing, healthy looking grass. Hydrilla being my first choice. But then once I've got, let's say, big grass flat, and I always kind of reference things to Rayburn, Toledo Bend, Dale up there where you're at, Champlain. You've got these big, massive flats. Champlain being a little different because it's a natural lake, but when I look at that flat, it takes too much time, let's say in Major League Fishing, just to fish the entire outer edge of that flat. So that's where my Navionics, my Lowrance really come into play. I want to pick the high points of that grass bed. And when I say high points, I'm talking about maybe a channel swing comes up, maybe there's a tighter contour lines that on the outside grass edge, maybe it's a point. Maybe it's an area that's a high spot that's in that grass bed. So just because I got a big, massive grass flat out there, really still pay attention to your Navionics card, your mapping card, to find something different. Don't spend your entire day just fishing down that outside edge. Find something different. And then once you find something different, try to duplicate as many times as you can. I also really want to pay attention to the wind direction. Throughout this whole thing that I'm going to talk about, wind is such a key component this time of the year, but I want to pay attention to the wind, what direction it's been blowing from the last 2, 3, 4, 5 days. It really will make certain areas shine. That wind blowing into a grass edge, any type of grass, that's going to be a key spot for me, the spot that catches the most amount of wind, or it could be wind generated current. I know like on a lot of those lakes up there up north of Champlain, there's going to be areas where it necks down, widens up. The amount of current that the wind creates to blow through there, especially if it's blowing 2 or 3 days, I've seen it blow 6, 8 inches of water to one end of the lake. And then when it quits blowing, that water gushes back the other direction. And I really pay attention to that. That's when those points are going to come into play, those narrow spots, stuff like that. So, good, like back to the good structure spots. And then you put the grass on it. Like for me, an example, Toledo being one of the best grass fishing spots that I ever had, would have been a really great structure spot without the grass. And so use that Navionics card to find it. I found an old railroad trestle, on this big flat down in 6 Mile. And man, out off the end of that railroad trestle, man, I caught a lot of good fish, flipping a big 1-ounce jig. So I guess what I'm saying is, I've said this over and over. I want to reiterate it. Pay attention to the structure below the grass. That's what you want to focus on. There's always going to be something different there that's going to be holding the fish. Really important also, the depth of those fish, because so many times people are going to mistake and think that the fish are on the bottom. You're dropping a jig, you're working a Carolina rig, you're throwing a crankbait. Pay attention to, did that fish eat that crankbait as that bait started to come up? Or so many times you'll throw a crankbait out there and you're just starting to dive and you'll get that bite when it's in 5, 6, 7 foot of water before it reaches its maximum depth, especially in July and August. Those fish aren't going to be at the bottom. They're going to be up and suspended on the outside of that grass. So maybe flipping that jig or whatever that bait is, they hit it halfway down. Really focus on that. And there's so many times I found grass flipping that they won't ever eat it if you bring it back up to them. They're always going to eat it on the way down. If you miss them on the way down, you've missed them. You can always say, well, I'll throw it down and then reel it up to where it's 5 foot off the bottom. They don't eat it. So that's why it's always so important to have such a big weight when you're grass flipping, especially in super clear water. I like that bait to fall really fast to get a good reaction bite. I don't give them a chance to think about, is that real? Is it not real? And, there's some baits I guess we got up on the screen right there. Just a Z-hog, a Z-craw, a brush hog. A lot of times those are bluegill imitations. A lot of times those fish in those grass beds are eating bluegill. But that's kind of the first spot that I'm going to look, is grass beds. If we got grass, and to relate that maybe, let's say, to lakes that don't have hydrilla. I'm trying to think of people here that might be watching that are in Oklahoma or that maybe in Missouri. Oklahoma, we got water willows that is a great grass, especially if that water's stained. All the same principles apply. If you got a harder bottom, if you got a point, if you got an isolated patch, you got wind blowing to it. Water willows in Oklahoma is the hydrilla of Texas or Champlain or New York. So just always keep that in mind. We may not have a lot of hydrilla here in Oklahoma, but water willows, any type of aquatic vegetation, it just puts off oxygen. It gives great cover. The bluegill are going to spawn in it, all throughout the summer, on the moon phases. So it's just a big, big key component on any lake you're going to. Late summer, try to find that grass. It's just really important. So we don't have grass. The next thing I'm going to look for, I'm on a brand new lake, and I'm going to look at boat docks. I think boat docks are one of those things that, man, they got shade, they got everything a bass needs, from shallow to deep, from the front to the back. And it's just, to me, it's a spot that, man, I can go and I normally can get a bite when things are tough. There's resident fish that live on boat docks year round. And it's just, I guess I'm just trying to tell you guys, when you're out there struggling and beating the banks and nothing's not happening, go give boat docks a try. And again, I look for boat docks that are different. If I've got a line of 100 boat docks, I'm not going to fish that line of 100 boat docks. Here's a perfect example. We got a dock right next to a point, on the left right there next to that red fish symbol. Maybe it's going to be the very last dock in the back of the creek. Find something different. You got a dock there on channel swing on the left going in right by, the 17. You got a road bed going underneath. You got stuff there to look at. So always pay attention, no matter what kind of deal you're doing, where that bite came from. Look at your map, look at the contours, think about the wind direction, think about all those things that why did that fish come from there? You know, isolated docks, wind blowing in on them, deeper docks, shallower docks. So many times it's the shallowest docks you can find, isolated. Can't tell you how many times I've caught big fish in August on some of the shallowest docks that I can find. Kind of an example about that, you know, kind of throwing the grass and the docks all together. You know, down in Florida, I won this event right here, dock fishing. I forget what chain of lakes it was. I think it was, let me think, I think it was a Harris chain. But what was neat about that, those docks created a void in the grass. So it was kind of a combination of both. You know, the docks were really shallow, but the grass could not grow underneath those docks. And it was a big key for me. And it was late summertime, just like we're talking about. And that's how I caught a lot of those fish in the first couple of rounds of that event. My next deal here, this is like fishing 101, in my opinion. Like, one of the things that I'm always going to do, July, August especially, run to running water. And it doesn't have to be a lot of running water. You know, it's, you know, here in Oklahoma, I can't tell you how many events I've had where in August, man, I'll run to the back of a creek, as far up that creek as I can go, and catch a good stringer of fish and do really, really well. It's just a given. And it's kind of backwards from what a lot of people think. But, you know, generally it doesn't take very much water coming in. There's always shade in the backs of those creeks. There's always a little bit of water coming in. It's dirty. There's bait fish back there. I do that. I'll run to the backs of those creeks. And it doesn't, you know, another thing I'll do, I'll use like Google Earth like this right here, and find a creek on a lake that I'm not familiar with that's actually got a live creek feeding into it. You got to think about the lake temperature is going to be 85, 90, 95 degrees. You find the back of a creek that's got water running in it, I guarantee it's colder, always. And, you know, Kentucky Lake, it's a prime example. When people start really struggling, July, August, you can win in the backs of those pockets that have those spring-fed creeks coming in. It is a given. It works all over the country. I promise you, it's one way to combat that hard fishing time in July and August. Run to the backs of those creeks. I'm reading my notes here. Hold on a second. More oxygen. That's one of the reasons. More oxygen draws bait fish. Water can generally be a little cooler. So important. A mistake I see people make when you run to those creeks. So let's say that creek's a mile, 2 miles long. If I fish any of that creek at all, any of it, I'm going to fish the very last 100 yards. That's so important. I hate telling everybody that, but it is the truth. And I'll tell you a reason that really backs that up. It's a proven fact. You can talk to any Oklahoma fisherman, any guy that fishes Oklahoma, but those fish, if there's going to be a bass in that creek, he's going to be in the last 100 yards. And it really opened my eyes here at the house. If you saw where I live, as a crow flies, I'm going to say 10 miles from Uligal Lake. And about 3 miles from me is my uncle's house, Uncle Joe, and his son-in-law, Adam. Talala Creek runs right behind his house, and there's a low water bridge and behind his house. We're talking 7 miles from the body of water. He has caught more 4-pound fish in a 2-foot hole this deep, where that low water bridge, where those fish can't go any further. And what happens is when that lake floods, all that rushing water is coming in the lake, just pouring. And Talala Creek, guys, is the width of my bed. It's pools. It's not a running creek year round by any means. It's pools. You know, like right now, if you were to drive across it, you're going to have to go 100 yards over dry ground to get to the next pool to tell you what kind of creek it is. But when that water and all that fresh water comes in and it rains, and those bass swim as far up that creek as they possibly can. And this pool of water that he catches these 4-pounders out of is not much bigger than a bedroom. It's not as big as a bedroom. I'm telling you, it's just amazing to me that he's caught multiple 4-pounders through the years out of this little pool of water. And all those fish come from Uligal Lake, and they swim upstream. So if that doesn't tell you to go to the end of the creeks, I don't know what else will. I got some pictures of some baits right here. You know, it's power fishing 101, crankbaits, top waters. You know, some of these baits I've got on here are about my next slide, but you know, basically everything here that I'm talking about is just power fishing, and it's about determining how deep a fish is in the water column. If you take anything away from this, I want you to learn where that fish is relating in the water column, because in July and August, they're generally not on the bottom. They're going to be up in the water column because that's where the best oxygen is. My next deal here, I've kind of winged through this pretty fast. I hope you guys have a bunch of questions. That is it. Figure out what part of the water column they're in. And it's generally dictated by the water clarity and where the bait fish are. You know, this past event at Sabine, I got into a backwater lake. It's about a mile long, about a half mile wide. It was an old rock quarry. And I really thought I was going to win in there. I mean, when I went and pre-fished it, it was unbelievable. Giant fish. Long story short, it took me about 2.5 hours to get in there. I got stuck for an hour. I had to wait for the tide to come up. And it wasn't worth my effort to get in there. Once I got in there, I fished it really hard, and I was like, man, I know there's a ton of fish in here. This thing's 30 foot deep, and when I idle across it, all the bait fishing, and you guys can relate to this. When July and August, when you go out to the lake, you see all these shad on top of the water, you know, and they can be out in the middle of the pocket. They can be anywhere. Those bass relate to those shad. The same thing was happening to me at this place down at the Sabine. I had to spend a lot of time there really waiting on tide to get up to get back out. And those fish were all out in the middle. I would literally catch them throwing at those shad balls with my topwater Diamante, the picture I showed you just a second ago. And it was random. It was so random. It was not even funny. You did not ever know where you're going to get a bite, and they weren't relating to anything. They're just suspended. I could see them on my depth finder. I'd see a ball of bait out there on my side imaging, and you'd see two big arcs right down there below them. I mean, there's not stripers in the Sabine. I mean, they were bass, no doubt, and they'd be 6 to 8 foot down. You know, we're talking about Louisiana. Fish aren't ever going to get deep to begin with, and you would see them, and it's the same thing all across the country. The best oxygen's up towards the top. You know, I had an event, the All-Star event up in Illinois. I was leading that thing after the first 2 days on Shelbyville. And I got lucky, and I figured out that those fish were suspended in the middle of those pockets. I started catching them on a vibrating lipless crankbait, you know, Megabass Vibration Ultra X, and just throwing that sucker out in the middle, right down the gut. You know, it'd come from 10 to 5 feet, and you'd be right in the middle, and those balls of shad are out there. And I mean, it was a really tough event, like that time of the year all across the country. But I'd catch those fish suspended about 2 foot underneath the water on a lipless crankbait. So it's frustrating time of year, but the fish are still in the lake. And the mistake that I've made, and I've learned through my career, is I'm generally fishing beneath them. And I think that's what I'm trying to pass on to you guys, that as it gets warmer, you know, some of you guys up north right now, it's not quite happened yet. You know, we're early June, they're still piled up, but when that water really gets on up there, 1st of July, August, those fish just move up in the water column. They're going to be shallower, not necessarily shallower depth, but shallower in the water column. They can still be out over 30 foot of water, but they're going to be suspended up in the tops of the trees on table rock or something like that. So that's what I'm trying to pass on. I hope some of this stuff kind of helps you guys out. And let's ask some questions, and hopefully I can help some people.
All right, well, let's get started. Hey, I told you when me and you talked about this afternoon, we were not talking about Sabine River.
I know, but I had to bring it
up. Not me. Just so we got clarity. We're still.
Hey, just to talk about Sabine River, I had 5 bass that weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces the first day, and I culled like 10 times to have that. It's the only time you'll ever see my weight exactly right on Bass Track. Those things didn't weigh enough to use my balance beam. I actually used scales. Frustrating event. I mean, frustrating event. But
no doubt. All right, let's get over it. Let's ask some questions here. Ryan Meeks, is there a wrong kind of grass or is it all good?
I think it needs to be a live green grass. If it's brown, dead, dying grass, yeah, that's not good.
All right. Does water temperature matter?
Well, yeah, water temperature matters. But with that said, though, I think the warmer it gets, the shallower those fish are going to get, the better the oxygen is going to be in a lot of our lakes. I'm not going to say that's going to be the case in every lake, but down there in Orange, Texas, like we're not talking about the Sabine, that water temperature is in the low 90s, and those fish are going to be really shallow. They're going to be up towards the top of the water column.
That was one of the images I shared with our PowerPoint was the creek flowing in. That was one of the images I took from Lake Lanier, and it's a spot I fish. And I tell people all the time, it's got a creek flowing in, and always the water temperature is 3 to 4 degrees difference.
Big difference.
There's bait in there, and there's always fish after that bait. So water temperature matters. So,
don't be giving away your secret spots.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't give the GPS coordinates. Ernest, Bugs Island, North Carolina, and Virginia. Do you look for grass or do you fish offshore structure?
I want to be a guy that's gonna go towards that grass. I want to gravitate towards that grass because 9 times out of 10, that grass is going to hold them. It's providing oxygen, providing cover. I'm not going to say you're always going to catch those fish in it, but there's obviously fish in it. They may be feeding at night, but I can tell you, if there's grass in a lake, there's bass in it every time.
That might be a T-shirt if there's bass.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Alex, when fish are suspended, do you like a finesse style bait or a power fishing bait?
Alex, that's going to really be determined by the water clarity. The muddier the water is, it's going to be more of a power bait that's going to displace more water where those fish can find it. The clearer the water is, it's going to be a smaller swim bait, a smaller type crankbait. It's going to be a finesse type deal. So, this is all relative to the lake you're on. If we're at Table Rock, and let's say our Beaver, where that water clarity is like really, really clear, everything just gets deeper. It still is a suspended fish over 50, 60 foot of water, and they're 20 foot down, but it's all relative to the lake you're on. Here on Uigal Lake, where I live, they may be suspended a foot down, over 6 or 7 foot of water. So it just depends on your water clarity.
Sean, what about grass eel? Well, what about fishing eel grass?
Eel grass, Sean, that's a great question. A lot of lakes like Gunnersville has really, got inundated with eel grass, and I think it's a great grass. Again, that eel grass can get really tall, and they can be suspended in the top of it. It's a great grass. It's good. I don't know what else to say. If I had my choice between hydrilla and eel grass, I feel like there's going to be more fish in the hydrilla than there is eel grass. But if eel grass is all you got, without a doubt, they're using it.
So let me ask a question here too, because we're talking about grass. We all know the grass produces oxygen. Is certain grass got more shade or more oxygen that causes the fish to relate to it?
I can't answer the question about oxygen. Now, shade,
Right.
yes. We all know how hydrilla and milfoil grow up, mat out, and provide shade. Generally, I'm more focusing on the outside grass line where it's not topped out. In most lakes, I'd rather catch them on that outside line. But, as the summer progresses, they'll be up under those mats. But, I don't know which one produces the best oxygen. I can't answer that.
Okay. Austin is asking, what's the best way to use 3D scan to find fish, and how do you use it?
3D scan, what I use it for, I want to see how far off a drop they are relating. For me, that's the scenario that I use it, because there's so many times when those fish suspend out off a ledge. I want to see how far out they are, how far up, how far down. If I've got the ledge breaks at 12, and I see those fish are up in, let's say, 9 or 10 foot, or maybe they're down deeper than the 12, it makes me position my boat different to present my bait to the right depth range that they are to the ledge, because I can really see how far away, how far up and down they are on that ledge.
Great tool. Caleb's asking for bank fishing at Rayburn. What's some tips that would apply?
Well, I wouldn't be fishing where them alligators are. No, I would. I mean, immediately in my brain, I would want to go as far up the Angelina as I could go. But then I'm thinking, yeah, there's going to be a lot of alligators up there. Bank fishing from Rayburn, that's a tough one because it's going to be hard. You're going to have to go over to like Powell Point and those all that grass around Powell Point. You know, it holds fish. Rayburn's kind of changed. There's obviously a group of fish out really deep, but there's big fish shallow year round on Rayburn in all that bank grass, like over around Powell Point, from there all the way up really to almost Harvey Creek. So throw like a Zoom horny toad, throw a mag draft on a belly weighted hook across that grass as far as you can throw it, and you'll catch some big ones. That water down there is really clear. Reel it as fast as you can reel it. That's the key to triggering those bites.
Braided line?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, good. William asked the best bottom under grass.
Best bottom under grass. Well, it doesn't grow too good on rocks, so I mean, it'd be great, you know, like where we got Dale up here at Champlain watching. If you had a big boulder right in the middle of that grass bed, you know, so that's really my perfect scenario. You know, if you had holes or natural made hole in that grass, but generally that grass is only going to grow on one bottom, so that's kind of a tough question for me to answer because
it's got to be tough for grass to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on. We're getting question after question here. What remaining elite event are you looking forward to? Charles is asking.
I'm really looking forward to lacrosse, but that one in South Dakota, I don't know how to say it. You guys are going to laugh at me. Hawaii. We've never been there. The thing's 200 something miles long. It's 300,000 acres. It's the Missouri River, full of smallmouth. I have to think that there's not too many of them that have seen a lure, just being the size that it is. And I love going to a new lake. It's a brand new book that I don't know the ending to, don't have any preconceived notions. You know, in my mind, when I get there, there's going to be a 5-pounder on every stop that I stop, you know, because I don't know any better. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
South Dakota.
Yeah.
All right. Thomas asked, he's been fishing 4 years out of a kayak, catching a lot of 14-inch and below. Most lakes I fish have no docks. Any suggestions for a method to catch bigger ones?
Where's he from?
Doesn't say.
I started in a small boat, Thomas. I used kick fins. It was called a fishing pal back in the day. I won my first tournament out of it. But no docks. I'm guessing he doesn't have grass either. So I'd like to really know where he's from. But man, just keep covering water. That's the biggest thing I can tell you. You've got to don't get stuck in a rut fishing where you had a bite a year ago, 2 years ago, or last week. Cover new water. Try to fish a new section of that lake. Put in somewhere different every time you go, and it's just really how you learn. You know, just kind of like what I just said about South Dakota. I don't have any preconceived notions where they're at. Thomas, you probably have some preconceived notions where you've caught bass at on this lake in the past. You had a successful day here that you really remember, and you always try to duplicate that. At times, that can be really bad. So, you know, you're still trying to live in the past. So try new stuff constantly.
All right. I think Caleb, we already answered his question. John's asking, if you're marking fish, how long will you try to get one to bite before you just move on?
Obviously not long enough. A tournament comes to mind that we had at Chickamauga a few years back. And when we have events like that, I idle for about 12 of the 16 hours and fish about 4. And I idled over a couple spots that I knew were bass. I felt like were bass, but when I'd leave, I'd said, there's no way they're bass because I would not get a bite. I should have. I'm to answer your question direct. I'm going to give it 5-10 minutes. I'm going to go through 4, 5, 6 baits. Crankbait first. Try to trigger one, speed crank it. Swim bait. A hair jig, popping a football jig. Generally it's something I need to do to make those fish react. I'm going to give them however long that takes. I'm not going to spend any more time than that. What I will do is come back, try it 2 hours later, 2 hours before, try it at daylight, look at the generation schedule, see when are they pulling water through that lake, and try it later. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time each time, but I may try it later.
Good answer. What factors make you choose a paddle tail over a fluke?
A paddle tail over a fluke. What is a paddle tail? What are they considering like a paddle tail, I guess, over a fluke? I'm assuming you are talking about, I don't know what he's talking about, a paddle tail, like a Zoom swimming worm. I wish I could ask them and they could.
Yeah. Well, if we don't answer it, I'll give everybody my email. We'll send it to help@navionics.com.
Maybe he's talking about a paddle tail swim bait versus a fluke.
Flip tail like a fluke? I don't know. We'll move on. We got a bunch of questions, dude. Ron Ledford, he's friends with Timmy Horton. He wants to know if you know how does Timmy Horton do so well with deep crankbaits. That'll be on the next webinar. Thanks for calling, Ron.
I can tell you, Timmy does so well with deep crankbaits because he'll be at the Sabine River when 99% of the bass are in 2 foot of water, and he's out there all day long fishing where that deep crankbait will run, and it's all he does. He eats, sleeps, and lives deep diving crankbaits, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
No doubt. In the backs of the creek, this is from Bradley. In the backs of the creeks, is there a certain amount of water you look for, or does it really matter?
Doesn't really matter. I like to have a creek that's got a little bit of water coming in it, and it doesn't take much. Like here in Oklahoma, I generally could tell like that water would be so stagnant in the back when I'd go down the center of that creek. If that path would close behind my boat, I could tell there's current in it. If you could still see that path, then there wasn't much current in it. That's kind of how I always would tell. But obviously that's dirty water. But no, and it doesn't have to have running water. Like, at Shelbyville, they were just in the backs of those pockets, because that's where this bait was. That's where the best oxygen was. So
that's cool. Tyler's asked, when those fish start to get shallower in the water column in the late summer, are you going to look on the main lake first, or are you going into the creeks?
Great question. That's I've got to try both of them. Obviously, those fish should be, there's going to be main lake fish. There's going to be creeks and pocket fish. Kind of depends on where I'm at, where I feel like the majority of the tournament winning fish are. I like the main lake stuff because I feel like it's got more potential, bigger fish, more fish, replenish more often. I get in the backs of those creeks, after a 3-day practice and a 4-day tournament, they can get beat up pretty bad. But, if it's a small event and you don't have to worry about any of that, go straight to the back of those creeks. It's 6 to 1, half a dozen. They could both be good.
Yeah, that's good. Brandon, in warm water, do you seem to relate to rock or wood, or more often is the lake just has no grass? In warm water, do they seem to relate to rock or wood more often if a lake has no grass?
Warm water, rock or wood. For me this time of year, it seems to be wood. We're talking about a lake that doesn't have grass. They seem to be on that rock, earlier in the year. And for me, it's more of a wood deal.
Yeah, good. Tyler asked, what's a good way to find bigger fish in the lake that drops low in late summer to early fall?
Better way to find bigger fish in a lake that drops low in the late summer, early fall. Hey guys, when y'all are asking these questions, tell me where you're from, what lake you're talking about, just whatever.
There you go.
Because I might be thinking something completely different than you.
Let's talk. I'm thinking drought. What about drought lakes? That'd be a good way to relate it, maybe.
It doesn't really change. They just move out. As the lake comes up, they're getting out further. They don't want to be trapped in the back of something. Um, for me, when I think of a drought lake, I think of Amstead. That thing fluctuates a bunch.
Ooh,
Falcon,
yeah.
it fluctuates a bunch. So you're just moving to the next piece of cover out from where they were.
Yeah, that's true. Deal. Mike's got a good question here. He's from Texas. When it's windy, do you see and catch more bass on the windblown side, or do the bass lie on the calm side and ambush the prey? Can you elaborate on why this is?
Without a doubt, I'm going to catch way more bass on the windy side. You've got the wind blowing the plankton, the shad following the plankton, the bass eating the shad, in addition to less water, less sunlight going through the water column. Because, if you ever swim in your swimming pool and you got a ripple on it, you can't see the bottom. When it's dead calm, you can see the bottom. It's the same thing with the bass, in that clear water. When I've got that ripple, that wind blowing, I can trick them into biting something fake a whole lot easier than I can when it's dead calm. So very, very rarely do I want calm conditions. Sight fishing in and around the spawn is the only time I really look for those calm conditions. The rest of the year, I want wind.
Good. He kind of had a little follow up to that. When you first try to find fish on the lake, do you see if they're deep, shallow, or whatever? Do you start deep and then go shallow, or do you just use your electronics and try to locate them?
I'm going to idle across that lake. I'm going to try to see where the bait's relating. I'm going to try to see what the water clarity is, see if I see any fish. And I'm going to let that tell me. Water clarity is going to dictate how deep I need to look. The stained, the more muddy, the shallower, the clearer. Obviously, the deeper. So, this time of year that I'm talking about, July, August, I'm going to let that bait fish dictate where I'm going to start my look. Yeah. And it could be, it could be on Table Rock Lake, and it could still be deep water, but I'm fishing shallow. It could be the tops of trees and 30 foot of water, but I'm still fishing that top 5 foot of water column. So keep that in mind. That's what I'm trying to, I guess, make a point about.
I think the other point, Edwin, you made that was pretty good too, is talking about Kentucky Lake and practicing. You don't fish a whole bunch. You did a lot of riding.
I don't fish any.
Yeah.
I won a tournament on Lake Erie a few years back, and the group of fish that I won on, it was kind of weird how I found them. I caught a fish and sat down, had to retie everything. The wind's howling. And I hate to say this, it's not the case anymore, but when I got back on my boat, I went to idle back up there, and I come over a big old rock pile that wasn't on my map. And when I idled over that rock pile, I could tell there was 1,247 bass on that rock pile. And I never stopped. I made a waypoint on it, and it's where I started my tournament. And I have that much confidence in my electronics that I started that tournament on a spot that I never dropped a bait in the water, and I won right there. I didn't want somebody else to see me out off the structure, because we all have the same maps. And if I'm out there past everybody else and I'm fishing, it's going to draw attention. And Kentucky Lake is the worst. When you guys go to drop that trolling motor in, everybody else around you is looking. When I go to practice Kentucky Lake, I see a group of them, I waypoint, and I just keep going. I don't even turn around and go back over them because it draws attention. So, 9 times out of 10, we don't have to worry about that stuff. But my world is pretty competitive, and you do have to worry about it. But no, it's very, very critical. I've won a lot of tournaments behind the wheel of the nitro, not on the trolling motor, all in practice finding that stuff. So
that's good. Behind the wheel. So that make you a wheel man. So Austin has a good question. He said, what's the best way to fish grass on a river system?
Best way to fish grass on a river system. Did it say where he's from? No. Nope. Just curious. Man, current. You got to find the current. It's going to be outside bends. It's going to be eddies. It's going to be ambush points. I'm thinking like maybe he's talking about the Mississippi River or someplace that I'm fixing to go. You know, you're looking for those current. I'm going to be throwing a frog. I'm going to be throwing a spinnerbait. You know, be flipping a little bit, swimming a jig. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Good. All right, man. Would the shallow theory that you would apply to lake like Champlain or any other typical colder climate lakes?
Yes, definitely. Same thing happens up there. You know, that you lose that good water. Those fish in August get really hard to catch up there, you know, at Champlain, and they just come up in the water column. That's the biggest thing. They come up in the water column, you know. And you may still catch fish on the bottom, but a lot of times those fish follow that bait to the bottom. I've seen it on my electronics so many times. You know, you get outside that grass a little bit and you see that streak going down. You know, last time we were up there, old Aaron won on a drop shot. You know, those fish weren't all the way on the bottom. They're still was able to catch them on a drop shot. So, no, without a doubt.
Can you break down points and ledges on Navionics for summertime?
Break down points and ledges. That's a broad one.
Yeah, that one is.
Well, let's talk about it. First thing I want to do, summertime. I want to know what kind of current I got coming through the lake. I'm gonna see, you know, if it's Lake Texoma, if it's Lake Eufaula, if it's a lake right here with Dooligal, or it's Kentucky Lake where they generate lots of electricity. I am going to check to see how much water is going through that dam on any given day. I learned back in college, there's way more current in those lakes than we ever gave them credit for. I was setting brush piles, and it was about 6 foot of water, and I had this concrete block, and I had all these willows stuck in this concrete block, and I'm trying to get it perfectly set, and I'm setting it in a saddle, and I could not stand on that concrete block. And it was wind current. It wasn't even current going through the dam, but it was so much current it would pull me off that block. So that's why I'm telling you guys it's so critical. There's more current in a lake than you would ever really realize. So I'm going to really think about that when I'm looking at that Navionics map on my unit. What is going to catch the most current? It may be a saddle between, you know, two islands. It may be a point that sticks out further than anything else. Maybe a spot where the lake kind of gets narrow, you know, like an hourglass deal. So I always tend to think about that kind of stuff, and that's where I'm going to start my search.
Cool. I'm going to scan down because we'll get time-wise. We don't want to ruin the evening. What are some tips of choosing the colors of baits to use in northeastern Oklahoma lakes?
Tips of baits to use in northeastern Oklahoma lakes. Great question.
Colors.
Guys, I keep it really simple. Bass eat 3 things. They eat shad, they eat bluegills, and they eat crawdads. We sell a lot of frogs. We sell a lot of lizards. We sell blackbirds now. We sell lots of other things. 90% of the time, though, let's keep it simple. Shad, bluegills, and crawdads. Break it down a little further. Crawdads, wintertime, springtime. Bluegills, summertime. Shad, summer, fall. I'm going to pick a color really this time of year that's going to be shad related, maybe bluegill related. So it's going to be a chartreuse blueback, or it's going to be a sexy shad color. And one of those 2 baits is going to get me a bite if there's a bass there. It's all about finding that location. I'm not a guy that's going to sit there in the bottom of my boat and change lures every 5 minutes. I've seen it time and time again back in the co-angler days. The wrong bait in the right place will catch them. I promise you. You may need to change it up a little bit after you've caught a few fish, but it's all about the location. I know we got the most prettiest baits out there in the world, and bait people probably hate me for saying that, but it's about covering water. Why do you think Kevin Van Dam's so good? He covers water more than everybody else. It's about putting the bait in front of the fish. Hope that answers.
Yeah, that was good. Hey, how do you find grass using down scan, side scan, or 2D? That's a good question from Kim.
how do I find it? Man, I see it out there, you know. You can really tell a lot about it with down scan. You can see how thick that grass is. You can see fish in it. That's what's amazing to me on that down scan. I can actually see fish in it, where they're relating, how far up, you know, if they're at the top of it. You know, I'm talking about deeper grass, you know, 18, 20, 25-foot grass. You know, the units have gotten good, so good, these carbons now, you don't have to change anything. Some of those older units, you might have to change a little bit the contrast to get it to read a little better, change sensitivity a little bit. You know, I'd still leave it in auto, but I might plus or minus it some. Really, I don't do anything other than just use them.
Study your maps before you go fishing. William says he fishes in Georgia on Oconee. He said almost no grass, but tons of docks. He said he's struggling to find the best docks. Run up the main river or run to the back of the big creeks.
Okay, I'm gonna start off by saying I've never been on Oconee. I'm guessing though, I'm assuming, and well, no one assumes spells, but I'm assuming it's going to be pretty clear water.
Lower end, upper end's muddy.
The upper end's muddy.
Yeah.
So you got water flowing in?
Yep, river.
Big Creek's got water flowing in too?
Yep.
You know, is the main lake all really clear?
Not really, kind of muddy.
So it's a muddy lake.
Yeah, lower end by the dam stays clear, but the rest of it stays kind of muddy.
I can't answer that. I mean, I'm throwing darts at a board there.
Run to the lower end clear part where I'd tell you to go.
There you go. Hey, try Big Spoon. You know, that's a great way to get. You know, you guys can watch that Travis event. You know, there's lots of big fish caught on that Big Spoon, limited in them docks.
Oh, this is a good question. Nobody's asked this tonight. What do you think about Major League Fishing event on Lake Erie, out on Erie in Pennsylvania?
I'd love it. Let's go. I know exactly where I'm going and what I'm going to do, and I would love it. Let's sign me up right now. I'll get in the truck and start driving. So
I'll call Don.
You're lucky if you live there. That's a neat place. Even in that bay, that's a beautiful, beautiful area. Me and my wife love that spot.
Mm-hmm. Here's Scott. He was asking about the Fluke and the other thing.
Yep.
Contact swim bait over a Zoom Fluke.
They're two different baits. The Fluke for me is a bait that I'm going to use, schooling fish, in and around, bedding fish that are garden fry. The Kitech for me is a bait that I'm catching suspended fish on. I'm catching fish around docks, just swimming that thing, on whatever size head and whatever depth I need. That's a bait that I can get deeper, shallower, however long I'm counting it. To me, they're two different tools.
Gosh, I got to do this one. So Alex Roberts writes, boomer sooner. I guess that's for you, bud.
Heck yeah.
If you're fishing bridges, what do you look for and what baits?
Bridges. Well, you want to look, see, shad. We got shad. What depth are the shad? Because that's where I'm going to start focusing what depth I'm going to fish on those bridges. The previous question, that Kitech, that style bait is going to be a great, great bait. I'm going to make multiple casts on the same piling, count it to 4, count it to 6, count it to 10, different depths is what I'm trying to say. Bringing that thing by. I mean, I've caught them on crankbaits. I've caught them really good, throwing a topwater walking bait. I'm looking for the shady side, looking for the current. I'm missing some stuff here, but that's all talking about the suspended bridges that are deeper. If that thing's shallow, I actually did a television show on Bass Pro Shops, fishing bridge pilings, and I caught them really good on a drop shot, on the bottom and a jig. So, it's kind of interesting on those bridge pilings. You're always going to have a hump behind them. The current always deposits a big rock pile behind them, something to always kind of remember. There's always going to be brush and stuff caught around them. So, You know, clear water situations, Grand, Table Rock, that kind of stuff, you know, Truman. I think Alex was from, this guy's from Oklahoma, so he's talking about
Yeah.
Grand. You know, it's going to be a crankbait's going to be my number one if it's fairly stained water like Grand. If it gets much clearer than that, then we're going to those swim baits. A Zoom swimmer, like a paddle tail swim bait on a 1/2 ounce head is prime. I mean, really, really good.
Good. All right. Last question.
Hey, one last thing on that. Tell
All
him,
right, go ahead.
don't super good deal. Take a wacky rig Cinco, throw it up there on a spinning rod, and let it sink as far and as long as you can. If there's a bass on that bridge pilot, he will eat that thing.
Good. Last question, and then if anybody has any questions we get done, if they'll email help@navionics.com and say Edwin's webinar, I'll get the questions composed and we'll try to answer.
Hey,
right.
tell Greg, I just seen that question pop up. That guy brings me a blue tie in the middle of a seminar because my wife bought me a pink tie. Only tie I own. Now I have 2 ties. And everywhere I go, he busts me in the you know what because I'm wearing a pink tie. Did you see the question?
We're going to finish out the evening. So when you're rigging your electronics, how much power do you have designated for your electronics? I thought that was a good question.
That's a great question. Man, with the electronics that we have now, guys, I mean, I've got a 16 and a 9 up front right now. I've got 2 12s on my dash. I've got live well cooling system, power poles, you name it. I got it on that boat. I run 2 cranking batteries in parallel, 2 Optima size 34 cranking batteries in parallel. It's critical. Great thing about those Optimas, they got enough cold cranking amps to crank the Optimaxes, and you've got to have multiple batteries, bigger batteries than what we all had 10 years ago with the demand that we're putting on them. So very important.
Good deal.
And it's important too, guys, on those batteries to have a good charger. Don't plug that battery charger in the instant you come in from the lake. Don't let it build up any memory. Big extension cords. I can't get over the guys that are using 16 gauge extension cords. Those things, they get hot. I mean, you'll start a fire. 12 gauge is a must. The shorter the extension cord, the better. And open all your hatches. Those battery chargers this time of year generate a lot of heat, and they've got an internal thermostat in them that they won't charge your batteries quick enough. So open those hatches in the back this time of year to let the back of that boat cool off. They'll charge up that much faster. Good
deal. All right, brother. Appreciate your evening. Tell the wife and kids we said hey, and great webinar tonight.
Well, thank you, everybody. Whole bunch for being a part of it. I wish everybody the best. You guys out fishing. Thank you guys for your time, and appreciate it a bunch.
All right. Good luck coming up. Where are you going to next?
We are going to, my wife and son are going to travel, kind of exciting, to Wisconsin, La Crosse. So super excited about that. It's a great fishery. Can't wait. And then we leave from there and go to South Dakota. So then I think we're going out east to Chesapeake Bay or something. So be good. We got a busy schedule coming up.
All right. I'll see you on the road.
All right, Tom. Thank you. Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody.
You. Bye-bye.